The envelope arrived on a gray, rainy Tuesday, just as I was finishing a call with a developer in Tokyo about our new property. Heavy, cream-colored stationery with gold trim. My assistant, Mara, brought it in with a quizzical look. Hand-delivered, she said. No return address, but expensive taste. I didn't need to open it to know what it was. I recognized the Morrison family crest embossed in the corner, ornate and proud, just like the people who used it. My stomach tightened as I slit the seal with a letter opener. The Morrison family annual reunion. Saturday, 7 p.m. The St. Emery Grand Hotel, Manhattan. Formal attire required. Of course. The St. Emery Grand. Rich, flashy, and recently acquired by LC Lux Group, my company. My flagship. They didn't know that, of course. They thought I was still Olivia Morrison, the hotel clerk, the family disgrace. Not the woman behind one of the most successful luxury hospitality chains in the world. These days, I go by Liv Carter. It had been 11 years since I'd walked away from the family banking dynasty after a very public screaming match with my father. He wanted me in finance. I wanted something real. Something of my own. You're throwing away your legacy, he'd spat. Maybe I was. Or maybe I was building something better. Back then, I didn't know where the road would lead, only that it would start in the service elevator of a rundown boutique hotel in Brooklyn, not in a penthouse boardroom. I stared at the invitation a moment longer. My thumb brushed over the raised gold letters. The Morrison name still had the power to make me feel 14 again. Awkward, invisible, not good enough. I nearly tossed it in the trash. Then my phone lit up. Diana Morrison. I sighed. Of course. I answered with a clipped, hello. Liv, she sang, too brightly. Oh, good, you got the invite. I wanted to call ahead, just in case. In case of what? I asked flatly. A pause. Well, you know how exclusive the St. Emery is. Very A-list. Daddy's bringing some important investors. It's going to be quite the event. Her voice dropped an octave. I just didn't want you to feel out of place. Because I can't afford to be there? I asked, deadpan. Oh, don't be sensitive, she cooed. It's just, you've always had such a quirky little career. Working in hotels and all that. So quaint. She didn't realize she was insulting the owner of the venue. I glanced out my office window. The Manhattan skyline glittered like a crown of diamonds. From the top floor of the LC Lux Tower, everything looked small, including the family that had once made me feel smaller. Thanks for the concern, Diana, I said. Who chose the venue, by the way? Oh, I did. Daddy says I have impeccable taste. And I had to call in a few favors to get that hotel. It's so hard to book. I bit back a laugh. Her favor was a request through the standard website. The team had flagged it for me last week. I'd personally approved the booking, then quietly raised their rate by 40%. She went on. Anyway, if it's too much for you this year, we'll understand. Maybe next time, if your situation improves. I smiled. Not the kind of smile that reached your eyes, the kind that sharpens them. I'll think about it, I said and ended the call. After a long moment, I leaned back in my chair. The invitation still sat on my desk, smug and shining. Mara poked her head in again. You okay? She asked. I'm perfect, I said. Then I slid the invitation into a drawer and opened my laptop. I had an idea. If they wanted a reunion at the St. Emery Grand, then they were going to get one they'd never forget. The next morning, I arrived at the St. Emery Grand before sunrise. Not as the owner, but as someone who once scrubbed tile grout in silence while guests walked past without seeing me. I walked the floors in heels, my fingers brushing over polished wood and gleaming marble. Everything was immaculate, as it should be. This place was my crown jewel. I'd poured my soul into its walls, every chandelier, every stitch of velvet, every sensor that adjusted the lighting based on mood and time of day. I didn't just build hotels. I curated experiences. And now the very people who once laughed at my ambition would be checking in, completely unaware that the girl they banished to the kids' table owned the table, the banquet hall, and the entire damn building. I met Marcus, my right hand, in the lobby. They're due to arrive in 3 days, he said, handing me the updated guest list. We've assigned each of them a suite. I scanned the names. Diana and her fiancé, Suite 1407. My father and his new wife, the presidential. Uncles, aunts, cousins I barely remembered. Every single one of them carried a price tag in my head. Rooms they'd pay full fare for, with a special legacy fee tucked into the invoice. Petty? Maybe. But poetic? Absolutely. What do you want to do about the welcome signage? Marcus asked. I tapped my nail against my chin. Let's keep the Morrison name front and center for now, I said. But at exactly 7:15 the night of the reunion, I want the logo changed across the property. Screens, signage, digital keys. Everything. To what? To me, I said. Full reveal. The brand. The face behind it. LC. He smiled. And the name. Olivia Morrison Carter. I said a little more quietly. They buried that name once. I think it's time they saw it again. We spent the rest of the day prepping. I worked with the culinary director on the menu, refined versions of the dishes I grew up eating, turned into five-star cuisine. There was something poetic about turning my mother's overcooked pot roast into Wagyu short rib on truffle polenta. Every choice was deliberate, every detail a brushstroke in a painting I'd been dying to finish. And then, just before I left for the night, I walked into Suite 921. The housekeeping suite. It wasn't real, not anymore. It had been transformed into a minimalist guest room. But it used to be a storage closet with a narrow cot and a flickering light. The place I'd cried in the early days, too exhausted to move, too proud to quit. I stood there, remembering. How it felt to be invisible. How it felt to be underestimated. How it felt to take the long road alone. But I also remember the fire it lit in me. The reason I worked nights and weekends. The reason I read hospitality manuals, like novels. The reason I watched my mentors like hawks. The reason LC Hotels grew from one tiny Brooklyn property to an empire. That night, as I left the hotel and slipped into the back seat of my black car, I looked out the window one last time at the glowing sign above the entrance. The St. Emery Grand. They thought it was just a venue. They had no idea they were walking into a mirror. The Morrison family arrived in waves. The first to walk through the revolving doors was Aunt Cecilia, draped in enough silk to curtain a cathedral, her husband trailing behind like an accessory. Next came cousins I hadn't seen in a decade, their children in matching outfits like curated Instagram props. And then, fashionably late and insufferably loud, Diana. Excuse me, she snapped at the concierge, despite his perfect posture and even more perfect smile. We're here for the Morrison family event. I assume the arrangements are in place. Oh, yes, Miss Morrison, he said smoothly. Everything has been prepared, just as the host requested. Host? She didn't even notice the word. I watched from my office upstairs, the security feed split across 3 monitors. Every angle of the lobby, ballroom, and hallway laid before me. They looked just as I remembered. Entitled, polished, and utterly clueless. Marcus appeared beside me, holding a glass of champagne and a tablet. You sure you don't want to greet them yet? I swirled the glass in my hand, savoring the silence before the storm. No. Let them settle in. Let Diana make herself comfortable. Let her tell everyone how she pulled strings to get this venue. Funny, Marcus said. How she thinks her last name opens doors. Because it used to, I replied, standing. Until someone built their own door. I changed into a black suit, structured, sharp, and custom-tailored to say everything I wouldn't need to with words. Hair swept back. Red lipstick like a signature. I wasn't dressing up to impress them. I was dressing up for the girl they told would never make it past housekeeping. At 7 p.m. sharp, the ballroom began to fill. I watched them gather around champagne towers and bite-sized hors d'oeuvres they couldn't pronounce. Diana stood near the grand piano, posing like a magazine cover, retelling the story of how she secured the St. Emery Grand. I had to personally call their corporate office, she said, loud enough to echo. You know how it is. These elite places want to vet their guests. But once they heard I was a Morrison, well, doors opened. Oh, Diana, I thought, sipping my champagne. You're about to find out who holds the keys now. Marcus looked at me, checking his watch. 7:14. I nodded. Cue the change. He tapped the screen. One by one, digital signs blinked across the hotel, the logo of LC Hotels shimmering into place. The ballroom screen, the massive one above the stage, flickered to life. LC Hotels International. Founded by Olivia Morrison Carter. Gasps echoed. Murmurs rose. Someone dropped a glass. And then I stepped into the ballroom. Every eye turned. Every conversation stopped. And for the first time in a long, long while, they saw me. No one moved. I walked straight toward the stage, pausing only when I passed Diana. She looked at me like I was a ghost. "Olivia," she whispered. "What are you? How did you?" "I believe you were telling everyone about your connections," I said with a smile. "Please continue." She blinked, speechless. I turned to the crowd, voice clear and steady. "Good evening. I want to thank you all for coming to tonight's event. The Morrison reunion has always been about legacy, family, and tradition. So I thought it was only fitting you gather here, at the hotel I built, own, and operate." Silence. Then, quietly, my father's voice. "You own this place?" I met his eyes. "And 16 others." The room spun with disbelief. Glasses trembled. Whispers surged. But I wasn't done. "Welcome," I said, arms wide, "to the crown jewel of LC Hotels. The very empire I built while you were busy pretending I didn't exist." For a few long seconds, no one spoke. You could hear the clink of a champagne flute settling on silver. Diana stood frozen mid-breath, eyes wide as if the truth had physically knocked the wind from her. I walked slowly toward the stage, heels echoing through the ballroom like a drumbeat. "My name is Olivia Morrison Carter," I said clearly. "Founder and CEO of LC Hotels International. The St. Emery Grand, this hotel is mine." A low murmur passed through the crowd. I watched their expressions shift like dominoes. Confusion, disbelief, realization. A few were already flipping through the folders Marcus had distributed. Proof of ownership, revenue stats, a breakdown of tonight's premium booking fee. Diana grabbed her copy, her hands trembling. "You charged us more than the regular rate," she snapped, voice climbing. "I gave you a special rate," I corrected. 30% above standard. "Why?" Her voice cracked. "Because for years," I said calmly, "you treated me like someone who didn't belong in this family. Someone beneath you. And now you're here, paying extra to be in a room I own." From the corner of my eye, I saw my Aunt Cecilia sit down abruptly. My Uncle Gerald looked like he was swallowing glass. "Let me remind you of something," I continued. 10 years ago, I told you I wanted to work in hospitality. You laughed, called it customer service, said I was wasting my Ivy League education. My father said no daughter of his would ever carry luggage or wear a name tag. I turned to him now. He looked older than I remembered, his eyes searching mine like he was trying to rewrite the past just by staring hard enough. "Well, Dad," I said, "you were right about one thing. I never did end up wearing a name tag very long." On cue, the ballroom screens came alive with a video montage. Crisp, elegant images, the Maldives resort at sunset, our Tokyo rooftop garden, the Swiss chateau nestled against alpine peaks. Headlines followed. **LC Hotels disrupts the luxury market**, the woman behind the empire, from housekeeper to CEO. The applause started hesitantly, from my cousin Tom of all people. Then a few more joined in. And then, like breaking glass, the room erupted into clapping. Uneven, awkward, but real. Except Diana. Her face was red with fury, fists clenched at her sides. "You let me book this place as a joke?" "No, Diana. I let you book it because I knew you wouldn't read the fine print." She opened her mouth, but Marcus appeared beside her, calm as ever. "Miss Morrison, your room assignment has changed. A VIP guest has been upgraded to your suite. You've been moved to an executive room on the 8th floor." "You downgraded me," she hissed. "Think of it as poetic justice," I said sweetly. "Besides, that room? It's the same layout I used to clean when I started here as a junior housekeeper. I thought you'd appreciate the nostalgia." There was a quiet burst of laughter from somewhere in the back. My sister Mullen stepped forward, shaking her head and smiling like she couldn't believe she hadn't seen it sooner. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked, eyes shining. "Because I needed to show you." By the time the screens faded to black and the staff resumed serving dessert, the Morrison family had split into two camps. Those who avoided my gaze completely, and those suddenly trying to reintroduce themselves like we were long-lost best friends. Mullen stood with me near the back of the ballroom, watching the evening unfold with a crooked smile. "They're either afraid of you or trying to get on your good side now," she murmured, sipping her wine. "It's kind of impressive. It's definitely something," I replied dryly, scanning the room. Diana was seated in the far corner, shoulders stiff, glaring at her half-eaten soufflé. Her fiancé looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. Meanwhile, my father stood in awkward conversation with some of his oldest business partners, men who now viewed me as the person worth talking to. He glanced my way a few times, but didn't approach. "Not yet. Do you regret doing this?" Mullen asked, her voice quieter now. "The reveal, I mean." I thought about it for a moment. The years of rejection. The nights I cried in a cramped apartment over their words. The brutal climb from housekeeping shifts to global boardrooms. "No," I said. "This wasn't revenge. This was clarity." She nodded like she understood. "Still, you didn't have to give them rooms." "True. But it's not about what they deserve. It's about who I am. I was a hotelier. I created experiences, delivered comfort, and treated people better than they ever treated me. That was my pride. My power. As the dinner wound down, I stood near the exit, shaking hands and smiling politely. Some family members muttered congratulations. Others avoided eye contact. But I noticed one thing. They all left quieter than they came in. All except one. My father waited until the room had mostly cleared. Then, slowly, he walked toward me. Not with his usual swagger. There was something different this time. Hesitation. "I was wrong," he said quietly. I held his gaze. "Yes, you were." He looked down, then back up. "You built something incredible. And I didn't see it. I didn't even try to." There was pain in his voice. Regret. But not an apology. "Not yet. I never needed your approval," I said. "But I did deserve your respect." He nodded, shame flickering across his face. "Is it too late?" I paused, then gave him a small smile. "You know what's great about owning 17 hotels, Dad?" He raised an eyebrow. "I've got 17 presidential suites. Pick one. Stay a few nights. Figure out how to make this right." His lips twitched upward. Not quite a smile. "Not yet, but something close." He nodded once and stepped away. I turned to Mullen, who was watching with a soft look in her eyes. "You're a better person than me," she whispered. "Not better," I said. "Just not interested in revenge. I'm interested in legacy." The night stretched on, but I found myself retreating to the top floor. Away from the whispers. Away from the stairs. The Starlight Grand was my kingdom, and I had built it from the ground up. Every inch of it spoke my name. Every corner echoed the echoes of my hard-won success. As I stepped into my private penthouse, the city lights glittered outside, a reminder of just how far I had come. It was a sight that used to be a dream, now a reality that was all mine. The floor-to-ceiling windows framed the sprawling skyline of Manhattan, the same skyline that years ago had felt so unreachable. And now, here I was, sitting in the center of it all. Marcus stepped inside with the evening's final reports on his tablet. He handed me the file, and I scanned it quickly. The night had gone exactly as planned. The family was subdued, their walls cracked. Their pride had been thoroughly humbled. But now, it was time for the final touch. "Are you sure about this?" Marcus asked, leaning against the doorframe. "The expansion, the new properties?" I smiled, sliding the tablet back into his hands. "We'll save that for next year's reunion," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "I've learned that sometimes the best way to win isn't by showing everything. It's by giving them a glimpse." "You're playing the long game then," he said, a look of admiration in his eyes. "I've always been," I said, standing and walking over to the windows again. "You know, I used to think this was about getting revenge. I thought it was about showing them that I wasn't the failure they always said I was. But it's not. It's about proving to myself that I was right." He nodded, clearly understanding. "You've already won, Liv." I smiled again, but it was a different smile this time, one that was satisfied, content. "I know." Just then, my phone buzzed on the counter. I picked it up and saw a text from Diana. "Can we talk tomorrow? Please, asterisk asterisk." I didn't even hesitate. I typed back quickly. "Of course. Your breakfast reservation is at 9 a.m. I own that restaurant, too, asterisk asterisk." I set the phone down and turned back to Marcus. It's funny, I said. All my life, I thought success was about proving them wrong. But I've learned that it's really about building something I can be proud of. And now I can finally be seen for who I am, not for what they wanted me to be. You've earned it, he said quietly. All of it. I nodded, then looked out over the city one last time. Success isn't just in the thread count of your sheets or the height of your ceiling. It's about the experience you create. It's about making a statement. And mine, Marcus, is just getting started. I turned back toward the sleek marble counter, where a fresh glass of champagne waited for me. I picked it up, holding it to the light. The bubbles danced inside, reflecting the city's glow. As I sipped the champagne, I thought about the long road ahead, about what was coming next. Expansions in Paris and Tokyo. Maybe even a new project that would solidify LC Hotels as the world leader in luxury hospitality. The Morrison family might have thought they'd won by excluding me from their lives. But in the end, I had built an empire. And that empire would carry on, long after the last whisper of my name faded from their minds. Tomorrow, they'd face me again. And maybe this time, they'd understand that the real luxury wasn't in the wealth or the fame. It was in the freedom to be yourself,